Well, good morning everybody, and welcome to the Securing Our Future, Challenges and Strategies in National Security. My name's Alex Zelinsky. I'm the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Newcastle, and in a former life I was the Chief Defence Scientist for Australia, so I've got a little bit of background for this panel. But we've got a wonderful panel here this morning, and including Sir Angus Houston, the Air Chief Marshal and former Chief of Defence for Force for Australia, and currently also the Chancellor of the University of Sunshine Coast. Jeff Connolly, who's currently the CEO of Thales Australia. He's also had previously the former CEO of Siemens Australia, and under the Morrison government chaired the federal government review on university research commercialization task force, and most recently has been heading up the Economic Accelerator Forum. So welcome to you too, Jeff. And we're supposed to be joined by Tanya Munro, our Chief Defence Scientist. Tanya's up at Centre Estimates, so our thoughts and good wishes are with her. She's been ably replaced by Dr. Carolyn Patterson, who's the Chief of Scientific Strategic Planning and Engagement at DST. Worked extensively across Australian government, starting as a crypto mathematician with ASD and DST some time ago. But thank you, Carolyn, for stepping in today for Tanya. So, well, let's give a little bit of context for the panel. I was reflecting this morning, and it's been about 6 years since I left Defence, and boy, things have changed. 2 Trump presidencies, and with Trump 2.0 looking like very much a game changer in the foreign relations area and potentially changing the whole national security landscape in the Western alliances. We've had a war in the Ukraine for 3 years, a war in Gaza, increased tensions in South China Sea, Taiwan, and just this week, live fire exercises off the coast of New South Wales by the Chinese Navy. And Australia's made a big monumental choice in moving to a nuclear-propelled submarine and entered into the AUKUS arrangement between Australia, UK and the US. So all big things have happened in these last 6 years. When I was in Defence in 2018, the budget for Defence was $36.4 billion. And there was a talk about going to 2% of GDP. Now we're talking about 3% of GDP, and I noticed that President Trump was urging countries in NATO to go to 5% of GDP, which is extraordinary. But in 2025, the Australian defence budget is $55.7 billion, and it's projected to go to over $100 billion within the next 10 years, within this decade. So you can see really in the last 15 years, the budget in the 15-year period will treble from $36.4 billion to over $100 billion. So the question, of course, for all of us here is, what does this mean for universities? I know some of you might be having the thought, what if some of that money came to us? But that's not the discussion today. But our panel here will discuss the implications of this new defence capabilities that are going to be built for our nation and the opportunities. We'll look at 3 lenses: the future skilled workforce needs, research and innovation opportunities, and also finally, how can universities best work with defence for the national benefit? But really, I think to start off this whole session, we've asked Sir Angus to give us a kind of précis of where we stand and how we got to where we are in terms of these increased budgets, all this changed strategic landscape, and he's very well placed to do this, and I'd like to, particularly around the National Defence Strategy, which was released by the government last year. So Angus, over to you.
Thank you. Securing our future, challenges and strategies in national security. We live in a very dynamic environment at the moment, and a couple of years ago, well, in fact 3 years ago, myself and Stephen Smith were asked to do a defence strategic review with a small team. We had 6 months to do it, and we had a look at our environment. geopolitical environment, strategic circumstances, if you like. And what we found was that the United States is no longer the unipolar power in our region, or indeed in the world. And what we learned is that there is intense competition between the United States and China. And to some extent we're getting dragged into that, particularly in the South Pacific, and we've probably seen an instance of that recently with the Cook Island circumstances that New Zealand experienced, when the Cook Islands had an agreement with the Chinese, which also included upgrading their port. We see the Chinese behaving very assertively in our region. They've been coercing the Philippines and the South China Sea, and from day to day we see incidents with our surveillance aircraft, American surveillance aircraft, ships, and even divers. Essentially, it's not an easy environment that we live in. And of course, the other thing that is very significant is if you have a look at the military build-up in China, it's incredible. And if you just take ships, a very small navy back 20 years ago, they now have a naval fleet which exceeds the size of the United States, over 400 ships. And in addition to that, they have paramilitary assets, a Coast Guard of 142 ships, and some of those Coast Guard ships are extremely large vessels. So this build-up in our region, no transparency, no clarification as to why this is so, and the build-up continues without interruption as we sit here today. So in response to that, we recommended that there be a national defence strategy and a strategy of denial which would place us in a deterrent posture. And out of that came a number of responses by the government in terms of where their priorities lay in the defence arena. Number one priority for the government is the nuclear-powered submarine and AUKUS. The number two priority is long-range strike and the ability for Australia to manufacture guided weapons and the associated explosive ordnance. This was incredibly important because, simply put, we had no capacity to do that at the time. There was also an emphasis on upgrading our northern bases, and importantly for this audience, the fourth priority was lifting our capacity to rapidly translate new technologies into ADF capability with the help of Australian industry. In other words, we're looking for disruptive capabilities, asymmetric capabilities, which we could use to advantage in any set of circumstances where we got into a conflict. And if you have a look at what we've seen in Ukraine, currently the Russian Black Sea fleet is not in its usual base at Sebastopol in the Crimean Peninsula. It's way down the other end of the Black Sea. It doesn't go to sea because a nation without a navy has been able to dominate the Black Sea with missiles and drones, and is able to hold the Russian fleet at risk all the time. So when we say asymmetric capability, that's the sort of thing that we think we need going forward. I think I'll come back to innovation, workforce, and so on, when my colleagues have an opportunity to also add to my remarks. But just one thing about workforce. We had a good discussion this morning about skills, and there's a great opportunity for universities in terms of skills. And where I might finish at this stage, you all have heard about Quantum and the quantum computer they're building in Brisbane. Well, it's very interesting that they're partnering with 6 Queensland universities as part of that project. And the reason for the partnership is for the universities to educate the right sort of people who will be able to use the technology that the quantum computer will present effectively and competently. I'll leave it there.
Thank you.
On to some.
So I'm going to throw to Jeff. So Jeff, given this national defence strategy is very much dependent on having a defence industry which can actually deliver these capabilities for the Australian Defence Force. So as a leader in the industry, it would be great to give you your précis about where the workforce, etc., is going. I noticed that somewhere that in the literature is saying there's about 64,000 people employed in Australia's defence industry, and it needs to double by 2030. So that's a big challenge. So over to you, Jeff.
It is. Thanks, Alex. And firstly, let me say it's an absolute honour to be sitting on this stage in the university sector, which I've had a lot to do with over the last years. Honoured to be with Sir Angus again, who's the source of the strategy and view. We were talking outside a moment ago, and if I'm a university and I want to know where I need to be researching, and it's to do with national security, read the DSR, read the national security document. Don't read between the lines, just read on the lines because it's there. The topics that we're working towards are all there. And of course, DST Group, because they're at the heart of that capability that's got to get in the hands of the warfighters and this urgency that we're talking about. My remarks are going to be all about context, and it's a little bit my own experience with this sector and now my experience in the defence industry. But the background is I worked 38 years with a German tech company, very strong in dual sector education. And it really was pleasing to see the award last night for the advanced apprenticeship degree, because that actually changes the paradigm, I think. That whole view of what can our traditional group of 8 universities educate, and the sorts of curriculum they deliver and the sorts of qualifications they deliver, being challenged to move into something that's a little more what the nation needs just now. Without criticising the past, but what we're talking about is a change. We now work for a French-owned engineering company, but actually we have the stewardship of Australian Defence Industries, what was Australian Defence Industries, which is the biggest, broadest sovereign ability in the country. And I, with apologies to anybody from BAEs in the room, I still consider Thales to be the A in AUKUS, Australian Defence Industries, because that's where the capability will come from. I have chaired the Prime Minister's Industry 4.0 task force, and there's a synergy there, Alex, and I'm not sort of digressing into that. I'm not talking about my CV, but actually this cyber-physical world. Yes. Living in a simulation, living in a digital world, speed to production, being more competitive, is really also at the heart of what we're talking about and getting quickly what we need to the warfighters. I had the honour to chair the University Research Commercialization Project, and currently the stage-gated Australian Economic Accelerator, which is, most of you will be aware, putting money out for the things that line up to the national priorities, which has also, not surprisingly, got a defence pillar and a number of lateral enabling focus areas, not the least of which is manufacturing. So, if you believe in something called the fourth industrial revolution, Industry 4.0, it means this whole change of workforce, existing workforce, to what the future needs to look like, and what that means for dislocation and the amount of education and re-education we've got to do, it's massive, and I still think we're underdone, even though I tried to articulate what that might mean for the sector and beyond. If you believe on a national security level that we are closer to conflict now than we have been at any time since the Cold War, there's a sense of urgency attached to that. And more recently, if you believe that the sorts of things that we grew up with on globalisation and putting resources in countries where you could complementary bring things together and assemble them, what's happened, of course, is everybody's become much more nationalistic and protectionist. So here's Australia sitting there, and we saw this morning, to number 12 and number 13 in the GDP, sinking to 17 as others go past us. So how do we actually be competitive and be able to do things end to end where we haven't actually had to do that in my working lifetime? And then apply that to those other priorities we're talking about in national security. And it's quite a challenge for all of us in the room. Thales, once Angus delivered the DSR, we sat together and said, so what's our role? What's our purpose? And we simply came back and said, actually, our purpose is to be what the nation needs us to be. And I wonder if I can challenge the sector when you go back to your boardrooms to say, what's our purpose? What does the nation need us to do right now? And is it necessarily producing the education outcomes that we did out of the first industrial revolution? Maybe there's a need for the reallocation of those finite resources to get a different outcome. So their introductory remarks, how do we, and I'm particularly interested in the research commercialisation, and I'm fanned with a hurry up from Angus to say we have to get capability commercialised, means usable.
We'll come to that. Yep. Carolyn, what defence science technologies? There's a whole. You're the innovation engine of defence and part of creating new capability, and then obviously working with defence and industry to realise it. But can you tell us about some of the programs that are going to be associated with the new strategy?
Sure, and I will just start by also really passing on Tanya's apologies. I think you can probably appreciate that she'd much rather be here than sitting up at Senate estimates. Having been there myself, it is one of those fantastic experiences in the calendar. So I'm feeling really fortunate that I get to be here instead. Look, I think, I want to build on some of the things that Angus has said, because I think it really then brings us to IS&T and what the opportunities are, and actually what we're trying to do to be clearer about those opportunities. So there's a few things in particular I just want to draw on from Angus's remarks. First of all, absolutely the strategic context is very different to when Alex was the Chief Defence Scientist. And one of the things that really sticks in our mind is that we no longer have the luxury of geography or that 10-year horizon that we used to have as strategic warning. So that has absolutely driven the need for asymmetric capabilities. Great example from Angus, one that I want to throw out there is that there is an Australian company that has developed low-cost, expendable, uncrewed aerial vehicles made of cardboard. And they have been used to great effect in Ukraine. And I think as we're looking at what's happening around the world, the Ukraine in particular is a great example of why asymmetry can be such a force multiplier and can actually be really deterministic in outcomes. And that is why it is going across the enterprise in defence that we need to have asymmetric capabilities. And obviously science and technology can be at the core of this. One of the other things that has absolutely come up is this sense of urgency of this. It's getting capability into the hands of the warfighter as soon as possible. And if we think about, I was going to say ASCA, but this is me in defence speak, the Australian Strategic Capabilities Accelerator. one of the reasons, or the main reason it was set up, was to accelerate the development of capability and do it in partnership with industry so that we get capability to the warfighter faster. And if we talk about, everybody talks about nuclear submarines, but if we think about AUKUS Pillar 2, that again goes to the capabilities that we need and that we will work with partners on really, really closely. So one of the things that really excites me about, I guess, the NDS is that there is an entire chapter on innovation, science and technology. It is there front and centre. I would say that I think we've all known it, but it is now called out in stark relief. And that the greatest gains in our military effectiveness are going to be driven by how rapidly we can develop and adopt technology. So on the back of that, we've also put out, and some of you, I hope, have seen it, is the Defence Innovation, Science and Technology Strategy. We released it last year. And this is our aspirations to meet the urgent mission that has been given to us. And we see it as a call to action to everybody in this room and beyond. It is about how we as an ecosystem can lift and deliver the things that defence needs now and into the future. So it has a 10-year horizon, but we will refresh it every couple of years. And there is no accident that the strategy is pinned around the priorities, and as Jeff said, these are clearly articulated in the National Defence Strategy. What are the things that we need to go after? So the IS&T priorities, trusted autonomy, quantum technology, information warfare, long-range fires, hypersonics, and directed energy. And then within AUKUS Pillar 2, there's quite a lot of overlap in the priorities that we're looking to go after under that. So there are things about undersea warfare capabilities, hypersonics comes up again, quantum comes up, cyber's already been mentioned, artificial intelligence and autonomy. So these are all of the things that we're going now from an IS&T perspective, what we need to do. And partnerships are a critical foundation of this. We know that most of the R&D in Australia gets done in the universities. So how can we pull on that research and development and work with you and work together on the things that are Defence's most challenging problems? So it's really not, it is not an accident that partnerships are called out in all of the Defence guidance documents. But what we've done then in our strategy is go a bit further to say, so how can we help with this? I think there's often lots of conversations about, well, we don't know what Defence wants. So a key focus is being clearer about our priorities and then working with the sector, so that's industry and academia, on what are the models that are going to work best for us to be able to go after the things and the hardest technological problems that we need to crack for Defence. So I might leave it there. Thanks, Alex.
Excellent, Caroline. I think we've just had a very good introduction to there's a big problem. We've got a strategy to try to resolve it. We've got industry to work towards it, underpinned by fantastic technologies that Australia has got under development and a great opportunity to draw on Australian universities. I'd now like to just talk about the skills training, because this will require training of the workforce. I mean, if Jeff's going to double his workforce, where do they come from? What kind of people are they going to be? Clearly, Caroline's organisation, DST, will need more scientists and engineers and technologists. Who are they? What kind will we need? And Angus, I know that the ADF will actually grow in size by about 20% over the next few years, so from 80,000 to 100. So I might start with Jeff. Maybe you can talk about, you did allude to it a bit about the award last night. I know you're very passionate about training and how it should be done, so maybe give us a bit of a précis about where universities can play into the skilled industry defence workforce.
Yeah, thanks. So the fields, the sorts of skills we're talking about, there's a common set of skills if you talk about digitalisation. And there's, of course, the use of the digital tools, but also the writing of the algorithm from a higher-end engineering, so clear. I think in my working lifetime, the habit of industry was to sit back from the education piece and take the finished product. And the sorts of things that perhaps when I started secondary school, cadetships, internships, apprenticeships, fell by the wayside, and even Angus mentioned that the Defence Force did their own and actually gradually through cost pulled that back. So the sector's been left to do it, and I think going forward that won't produce enough, and industry needs to lean into, my view, the sector with, for example, and I'll use the Siemens example, what is the curriculum we used to teach our own people on digital twin, simulation. That curriculum exists. Why not use that from an industry side, modify it for the Australian context, and educate on it? Don't start from scratch, because it exists. It exists through industry, and that brings industry towards the sector. So I won't go any further in terms of the quantity that we're talking about, but all I will say is all industries, including defence industry, are clamouring for this digitalisation capability, and then all the applications in the digitalisation with the specialist fields of knowledge that put meaning into the outcomes.
So what you're talking about really is co-development of curriculum and people working and studying in some sort of sandwich mode, or 2 days a week here, 3 days a week there, or maybe even mixing it right up. So that's a kind of a model from the past, but you think, and really we know that in universities, if you wait just the graduates come out from some of the STEM courses, they're already hired in their second to last year and gone. So this really means industry has to engage early, but I think it's a real opportunity to get an investment from industry, and also the engagement of universities to help you build that workforce.
And Alex, I think the unfortunate thing was that the terminology that was coined, job-ready graduate outcomes, it got launched maybe with an unintended consequence, and it got sort of put down. But I think the intent was right. How do you get it closer to where the jobs are going to be at the end of a 4-year engineering degree, that you've already got something more than just the engineering degree, without putting that down.
Thanks. Angus, we might, I know we touched on micro-credentials this morning's breakfast, but I think you were saying that you saw a potential application of micro-credentialing into defence, into the ADF training, or into training in general. So if the Defence Force is going to grow by another 20,000 trained personnel, how do they do it?
Yeah, well, I don't know if the audience would know, right now Defence is having huge problems recruiting people. Right now there's a shortfall of about 4,000 people who will go into uniform, and another 500 who are needed for civilian jobs. So there's a challenge right now in getting the right talent into the Defence Force. But looking forward, I think the way we train the officer corps, if you like, the future leadership, there's a good discussion about the value of a university degree and what it does for an individual. Well, that's precisely why we went to the ADFA model. By the way, the military were dragged kicking and screaming to adopt the model, but fundamentally we take all the people who are going to be officers in the Defence Force, and they go into the campus, the Canberra campus of the University of New South Wales, which of course is the Australian Defence Force Academy. And that's been in place now since 1985, and it's been refined, and it's got better and better and better. And I can tell you, we produce a very well-rounded person out of that system. They do their education first, and then they do a bit of training in between times, and then they go into their very demanding training courses to become combat people, or engineers, or business people, wherever the requirement is. So that system's worked very well for us and is enabled by the universities. Of course, not everybody goes through ADFA. We also recruit outside of the Defence Academy, and people come in from other areas. These days, it's incredibly important that people go on to do master's programs and other postgraduate programs. But of course, with military people, they're often away for long periods of time. They come back and they might get a period of leave before they go on to the next assignment, and having the option to do a micro-credential would be very, very valuable. Similarly, if we're looking for new chiefs of Air Force, chiefs of Army and Navy, what we generally do is send the candidates over to a place like Harvard, and they do one of those high-level Harvard courses of about 6 weeks, and then come back, and they're much better qualified from that experience to do the demanding jobs at the very top of the Defence Force. I think that that work could be done by our own universities, and I'd like to see that happen in the not too distant future. But micro-credentials are a perfect fit for an organisation which is not stable in one place. They move around a lot, and if you need to do the education, doing it with micro-credentials is a good way to go. I'm not talking about right at the beginning. No. We do the full degree course first, but later when you're having to do the
so it's really post-qualification.
Post-qualification, yes.
That's a very good point. That sounds like a real opportunity there.
And just a couple of other things. Just bear in mind, we talk about STEM, digital, business, we've got space and cyber, and there's great opportunities now in terms of we've got to train our cyber workforce. And I think most people would know the big program, $7 billion program that the Australian Signals organisation is embarked on to train people, educate people in all of our capital cities. Great opportunity for universities there.
Yeah, absolutely, get involved in that training. Thanks, Angus. Carolyn, how do you become a defence scientist, or where do you get them from, or how do you hope to recruit people into work in the technical workforce in defence?
Thanks, Alex. Look, I think there's many ways, and if I think about my own personal journey, it was actually accidental the first time around and deliberate the second. I think, so first of all, I'd say, we are absolutely competing with kind of everybody else for the skills that we need. So we do need really, really bright scientists. We also obviously need people with ICT, with cyber, with information sciences, intelligence analysts, sort of like aeronautical engineers and all of those sorts of things. So I think some of it is actually word of mouth. We do still have a number of people in DSTG who have spent their career there. They love it. They're some of our best advocates. And so some of it is absolutely talking about the experiences and talking about the fabulous things that you can work on and the career that you can have. It is about tapping into universities and working with universities. And I think the more we can build the relationships of, hey, these are some great opportunities and this is how we want to partner, if people can see a pathway to a career, then they're more likely to come and join us. So I also think it's being more visible about the successes that we have and the wonderful things that we do. I think, personal observation, we can be quite bad about that. I'm pretty sure we can all name our cricket captain and our rugby captain, or pick whatever your favourite sport is. But can we actually name some of our key scientists so that there's a marketing issue here as well? If people don't see themselves in STEM careers, or if they're put off at a really early age, then we have a really small pool to pull from. So we do struggle, but we do have people who then go, this is the best place to be, get some really cutting edge things that I can work on. But we do it through a number of ways. We take people direct out of university. We do take people mid-career. So we have our Navigate program that's open at the moment. And it's looking for people who are in academia who want to try something different. We bring them into the organisation kind of at a mid-level. So there are many different ways to come into the organisation. But, as I said, we do struggle along with everybody else to tap into all the people that we need, and I think we'll continue to do so.
Thanks, Carol. Now, Angus,
can I just make a point about submarines, ships. If we talk about nuclear-powered submarines, nuclear physics is an area that we've got to pursue. I'm sure it's happening already.
It is.
However, it's not. It's going to be something that continues long into the future.
There's a whole bunch of engineers there, I think, mechanical, chemical, and electrical to go with that as capability.
Yeah, so there's that. And I think the other thing about shipbuilding, South Australia is going to be hit with a huge program. They've already got a big program running, but eventually they're going to have to build nuclear-powered submarines. And that will require a massive increase in workforces. If we have a look at submarines, nuclear-powered submarines, the Navy will have to increase the workforce from 800 to 3,000.
That's the submarine workforce.
That's just for the naval submarine force. If we look at the shipbuilding requirements in South Australia, the workforce at the moment, shipbuilding workforce, submarine building workforce, 15,000. That will have to double over the next 10 years or so to 30,000. So there's a huge education and training challenge there. And can I say, we heard about the 5 technical colleges that they've got one, they've got another one coming. I think South Australia has really grasped the nettle and really on the right track with how to meet the challenge of this huge change to their workforce requirements.
Thanks, Angus. And just to say, all the growth won't be in South Australia. It's national. It's defence is everywhere around Australia, most of the states, and I think the capability needs will be everywhere. So just to put that caveat on it. But
West Australia's got a similar challenge.
Exactly.
I just wanted to highlight.
Absolutely.
If you, South Australia's been working on it for about 10 years already. They anticipated that something like this was going to happen.
So we might get on to research and innovation. So this is a topic I know it's dear to Jeff. Jeff, in the previous Morrison government, did a bit of a review around commercialisation and helped establish some programs. One of them is in the defence space, or has been applied, the Trailblazers. So I know that one is between Adelaide University and UNSW, and I think that's going very well. So, but Jeff, do you want to talk about the importance of being able to take the innovations out of DST and commercialising them and getting them into Australian industry, ultimately back into the warfighter?
Thanks. Unfortunately, I missed the actual speech of Catherine Livingstone yesterday. And I think people told me she was talking about the difference between translation and commercialisation. Yeah. And starting off saying, okay, what's my use inspiration for this research as opposed to discovery? And again, let me be careful there. The beauty of the work we did on research commercialisation was that it was additive. It wasn't taking away from the fundamental research. It was just that if you'd like to do these topics, there's money available for you. I think that was a very important start point. The work of the Research Commercialisation Task Force said, actually, there's no single answer to this. Right? It's a patchwork, and even the minister at the time said this is a patchwork of responses, industry, PhD, trailblazer universities, for those that said, we actually don't think there's a rivers of gold from research activities. So whatever we've got as IP, that's available. And we have a standard model, a template, boilerplate. If you want to use that IP, you do it, and we don't overcomplicate it for the small, medium enterprises that want to work with the universities. And it was one of the important parts of getting access to those brilliant minds outside the sector, innovators, and connecting them into the universities without having them be afraid of that, an organisation that's much bigger and, of course, has processes that attach to it, which sometimes scare them away. So on the question of innovation, I would say we're in the mode of actually a stage-gated model that says, that's fine, you've made it to TRL3, let's get you up through the translation stage into commercialisation. Yeah. And you keep getting money, provided you make a progress. And by the way, you have to have a commercial partner along that journey, otherwise the funding might stop. And I know ASCA's adopted a similar stage-gated model, and I think for the time being, it's a mechanism of, I don't want to say fast success, but fast fail, maybe. Stop, it's not going anywhere, can't be commercialised, keep going after one new project.
Fail fast.
Yeah, I think this will be important with the review of research underway. That's underway at the moment. So I encourage you, Jeff, to feed your experiences into that committee, because I think there's some elements of your program I think that you helped push through in the last sort of 6 months, year of the Morrison government. I think we're using them now, and I don't think they're fully appreciated. So I think that's at my university we've got a trailblazer in the energy space, and that's going very, very well. It's for the investment of 50 million from the Commonwealth, we attracted over 200 million of industry investment, and it's very much about translation of research to commercial outcomes.
Doing it differently gets rewarded.
Exactly. But anyway, thank you for that. And Carolyn, I just wanted to ask you, one of the challenges when people want to work with defence, how do you work with defence? Who do you talk to? Because it's always a bit of a challenge, because it's a very big organisation, and I might just ask my colleagues here about how we can do that. So, starting with you.
Thanks for that. I agree. Defence is a huge enterprise. So one of the things I would say is that through the strategy and through the NDS and the other strategies, we're really trying to bring a focus to the types of things that we want and need to engage on. So if we look at, ASCA is obviously a key way that you can engage with defence, has already been touched on. It's about, translating things into capability as fast as possible. The way to engage with that is ASCA goes out with mission statements, and that's the way to engage with ASCA. We'll decide what our priorities are and then go out with a mission statement. That's an opportunity to engage. If you want to engage more broadly on kind of like IS&T, so we have the Australian Defence Science Universities Network, and that is a great collaboration between defence, state and territory governments and universities. They put out separate calls for information. We also have, our partnership scheme, all of the PFRAs are partners with DSTG. One of the things, though, that, again, we want to bring the focus to is being clearer about our priorities and communicating more what they are, so that you'll have a better way to engage with us. And as we look down the future, one of the things that we talk about in the strategy is, whilst it's really important to pull through capability now, we also have to have an eye to the future. What is the future focused strategic research? You may be familiar with the Starshots program. So it's what does Starshots 2.0 look like? And through that, there's a concept of defence research centres. Again, we want this to be a consistent and easy way to engage, such that it's not who you know and who do I call. So I agree, it is challenging at the moment. We are really looking at what are the best ways to engage with the ecosystem, so that we can tap into all of those great ideas and partner with the right people. But otherwise, use the mechanisms that you already have. But certainly we are getting better, I think, at being clearer in how we will engage and where you can go to look for problem statements and where to go to look for partnership.
Carolyn, if you may comment on two things. People get worried about the foreign interference issue and security clearances. Do you want to give a little bit of comments on that? What not to worry about, and also and if in fact you can get a clearance reasonably easy.
Yeah. So I think, look, I've had a security clearance for a very long time, but I recognise that is not most people's lived experience. To engage with defence, there is a small portion of what we do where security clearances are needed. But a lot of what we do with universities, particularly if we're talking future strategic research, it's like, what's that gleam in the eye that we might need to translate into capability for the future integrated force? It's at the lower TRL levels. It's unclassified in kind of our language, and I think everybody can appreciate what that is. At most, we might ask you to get a baseline security clearance. That is really, really easy. It's a police check. If you do working with children, there's a police check in that. And we do have a partnership arrangement, and there is a part of defence which has, kind of like the security partnerships aspect we will help you with that. If there is a need for higher level security clearances, then absolutely happy to engage and look for the best ways to sponsor people to do it and talk you through what it is. In relation to sort of like then, I guess the fear that, does this mean that I can't talk to anybody from another country? No, it doesn't. What we're talking about is things that are really, really important and sensitive. Of course, they'll be at higher classification levels, and that means that you can't necessarily publish some of your research in, journals around the world. But it doesn't mean that you can't collaborate with people from other nations. But it is also knowing who you are collaborating with and what you are collaborating on. At its heart, we want to make sure we're tapping into the best expertise possible. And whilst we have a fabulous, set of brain power in Australia, actually a lot of what we do, we partner with others. So it's who are we partnering with? Is important to know. It doesn't stop research and it doesn't stop you having conversations with others. It just means that at times, depending on what we're working on, sure, there might be more conversations we need to have about what that means for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very good. Well answered. So, Jeff, how do you work with industry, defence industry? How do you engage with them? That's when I worked in the space, it was challenging at times. What would be your advice? Particularly for universities, because it is a form of industrial funding, potentially, collaboration, be it in training and in research, innovation. So it's a real opportunity. I think it's missing sometimes in Australia. What do you think?
Yeah, look, if I was in the sector and I was thinking about how would I engage with a company like mine, and if you're talking about defence sector, for a university to engage, you would start at the primes, right? And then you would go off onto their global website. It's all there, and you can see what their research priorities are. And you could map that easily to the DSR and the national security. And actually, what we're wound up to do is to be consistent with those priorities and what's happening in the country. And it provided you're on that intersection point, to have a starting dialogue and says, I think you would be interested in this and I've got somebody to do that work, would go a long way. But a little bit of desk research would certainly go a long way.
There have been some changes in CASG, but they're slow. And, there's a lot more willingness to engage people as a consequence of the DSR and the NDS. Yeah. And I'm still oversighting the implementation of both. So we'll keep the nose to the grindstone.
This was probably one of the questions I wanted to put to you, Angus. You are in a very unique position. You're oversighting all these things with the Defence Strategic Review, its implementation, and yet you're also Chancellor of a university. So it's you straddle both.
That's the most demanding
so what
job.
would be your advice to us? For the universities, how can they get the best engagement with defence and really deliver something for the nation? Not everyone will, of course, but there are people who are interested in that. How do we go about it? And now, being in a university, what some of the constraints and the culture and how we're quite an open organisation for the public. So.
Yeah, I think defence. People think defence is very difficult to engage, but there are many, many ways to engage. Most universities have defence organisations nearby. That's probably a good starting point. But if you want to get involved, research. I think Carolyn's advice has been very good. In terms of education, there's the Commander of Training, who is responsible for oversight of the Defence Academy and the training and education of our officer corps, but also there are elements under that person's command, the training and education of other people as well, the specialists and so on. So that would be the point to go in, I would think, commander training. Or just basically go to the website, have a look at it, and you can usually find the person you need. But the best way I've always found is to find out who the person is, and then go and get an appointment and engage them.
But in your opinion, now that you know what you know on both sides, do you think it's a missed opportunity at this stage between universities and Australian Defence Force to get the best?
I think the communication could be better, because I think universities tend not to know what's happening in defence, and vice versa. Defence, except in very specialist areas, tends not to know what's happening in the university sector. And I think engagement, working on a partnership, is the way to go if you've got something to offer as a university.
Jeff, I think you...
Yeah, I missed we haven't even mentioned the word collaboration as a word separately yet, and it actually is the key. Some of the work we did with some of the universities, Swinburne, I'm not sure whether Pascal's still in the room, UTS, for example, we were talking about test labs. And if you've got a research environment that's set up that's relevant, and you get industry to come on and use it and see what it looks like, and you're researching on it and you're actually educating on it, then you get a triple helix in a way that you foster in a systematic way the coming together of the stakeholders. And the original university research commercialization scheme was, how do you systematise, I made that word up, I think, something so that it's not just coincidental, but it actually has a better than even money chance. So that facilitating of the forums, I think, is very, very important for all of us to try to push.
Thank you. I'm just looking, there's a red light flashing at me. So, colleagues, I think we might want to wrap it up here. So, ladies and gentlemen, could you thank our panel for a fantastic discussion?